Welcome back to the Laidback Achievers podcast. I'm your host, Emily Stevens, and today's episode is titled Therapists and Coaches and Gurus, Oh My. And the reason I titled it that is because I want to talk about mental health and life management in 2022. Okay. The stigma around mental health help is being challenged more than ever, and that is a super great thing. But also, more than ever, there are so many people out there telling you that they can help you with anything and everything that you are dealing with, whether they have the credentials to actually help you with that or not. And that's one of the downsides of things happening. Now, let me be very clear as we go into this. I am 2 out of 3 of these categories. I am a therapist and a life and business coach. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I'll take it. So this isn't to put any one of these professions down. It's just to talk about the differences between them and also just some observations about mental health and life management help in 2022, because it's just way different than it ever was before. And that starts with the stigma. I think a lot of people think of therapy specifically, as how they portray it in the movies. Somebody comes in, the patient or client comes in, they lay on a couch, their back is to the therapist is behind them, not paying attention, taking notes, whatever. The therapist just says, okay, how does that make you feel? And although that's not inaccurate in the sense of, you don't lay down and not face your therapist. I guess you could lay down. I had a client the other day that wanted to lay down, and I was like, yeah, grab the blanket, get comfy. But typically clients just sit on a couch and face you, the therapist, like clients face me. And we discuss what is bothering them in life, what their struggles are, both emotionally and otherwise. And we talk about the skills to make that better. Really, at the end of the day, going to a therapist is just learning new skills. And this is I could do a whole podcast episode on just the stigma around mental health, which I guess we're going to tap into that a little bit with this. But I'm not sure what people think is going to happen when they go to a therapist, but let me clear it up right now. You go to a therapist to learn new skills. That's really it. You go to a therapist to learn new skills. And I always equate it because people will think because it's mental, like, well, I can handle it. Let's just handle this in-house. Let's just do this. We can figure it out. I'll figure it out on my own. But that would be like if I had a broken arm and I was like, you know what? I got duct tape. I've got YouTube. I can figure out how to fix this broken arm at home. I might be able to somewhat help my broken arm, but is it going to be as good as going to a doctor who's trained on how to put on an appropriate cast, how to get the bones back together, how to do all the things that are involved in fixing a broken arm? Right. You'd want to go to the professional. And the same applies to mental health help. It always is interesting to me how people think they can do it on their own when you would never think, oh, I'm just going to fix this broken arm on my own. You would never think that. Nobody would think that. If I said to any one of you listening, if I all of a sudden broke my arm in front of you and I said, oh, no, I'll handle it in house, you would look at me like I was insane. You'd be like, no, we're going to a doctor, right? And so I want you to think of mental health the same way. And I don't want you to think of it like your brain is broken. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you don't have the skills developed to handle whatever is happening in your life. So you go to the professional to learn how to implement skills, to learn those skills and learn how to implement them that help you not only in that moment, but moments after that for the rest of your life, right? That's not to say that after you learn the skill, you won't have to come back for a refresher, or there might be something else, or it gets more complicated. But it's really about learning skills. Because a lot of us growing up in our nuclear families, we didn't learn conflict resolution or communication skills or how to set boundaries or how to overcome like imposter syndrome or how to have self-confidence. A lot of us didn't learn those things because our parents didn't learn those things from their parents who didn't learn them from their parents. Like, it's not a matter of everybody else got the memo but you. Nobody really got the memo. And that's why we have therapists. That's why we have coaches. That's why we have gurus to help us learn these skills. But I want to clear up the idea that therapy is anything other than going and gathering skills and processing through information. Now, depending on your diagnosis, there's a lot more involved. There's many different types of therapy. There's many different techniques. Therapists use a lot of different ways to help impact someone's therapeutic experience. So I don't want to boil it down and just say it's just skills in BD, because people are trained very, very well. And that's going to take us into the fact that therapy and therapists are regulated. There's a governing board. So, like in the state of Kansas, there's a board that monitors my license. Okay. I am licensed, and there's a board that monitors that. So if I do something unethical, then there is a place to go to say this was unethical. Or if there's an issue of some type, there's a place to go to say that this is an issue. Same with that I have a code of ethics that I have to follow as a therapist with my credentials in the state of Kansas to be licensed. And in order to practice, you have to be licensed and active with the board. So the reason I'm telling you this is because that's important. Because when we get to coaches, we're going to talk about how there isn't a governing board, which doesn't necessarily make that inherently bad. I'm just highlighting the differences. It's just like with doctors, with dentists, there's a governing board to make sure that they are upholding the ethics of the profession, right? And that's a very good thing. We want our therapists to be ethical and to be moral and to be upholding the ethics of the profession, right? That's a very, very good thing. With that, there's continuing education. So there's so many hours of continuing education that you have to get within a 2-year period. And there's some specifics on what education you need to get. Again, same as doctors, lawyers, anybody who has a license through the state has some kind of continuing education that they have to get, right? To maintain their license. And we love that. But at the end of the day, I don't want you to be scared of going to therapy. I don't want you to be scared of going to a therapist. I recently had a client that came in that said, I was really scared to come here. I didn't know what to expect. I was really hesitant, but it just got to a point that I couldn't do it any longer. Like it was, they were at the point where they needed something. And so they came to a therapy session and left and loved it. They want to come back. They're scheduling sessions for the foreseeable future, because I think they realized, oh, this isn't scary. This is just talking about what's going on in my life, processing through the things I've dealt with, and learning new skills to deal with those things and to deal with them in the future, to deal with new similar things in the future. So that's therapy. Okay. And like I said, I am a therapist. I'm also a life and business coach, and I'll describe kind of the differences coming up here in a minute. But I love doing therapy. I love helping people have hope. I love helping people get through dark times. And there are times that this job is really, really hard. It takes a lot of mental energy to show up for somebody like that. But to me, it's really worth it. It's really cool and really worth it. So that's the therapy side of things. And I'm going to give you the actual definition that I saw for a therapist, because I'm going to read the definitions of coaches and gurus too. So a therapist is a person who treats psychological problems. So that would be anything under the sun, basically. But the distinction here is that a therapist can help you with deeper things like PTSD, trauma, depression, anxiety, like generalized anxiety disorder, not just like day-to-day worry necessarily, but like when you have a disorder with it. But I also want to encourage you that a therapist can just help you with life management tools too, right? You don't have to have some deep seated thing to go see a therapist. If you just want someone to talk to for an hour that's unbiased, that is a third party, that doesn't care about the outcome except for your happiness and well-being, then you can go see a therapist for that. So next, let's talk about coaches, because there's life coaches, there's business coaches. You're going to see all different kinds. So let me read the definition of a coach. A coach is a person who counsels and encourages clients on matters having to do with careers or personal challenges. Now, I loved this because Tony Robbins is a famous life coach. And his website says a life coach is like a supportive friend and trusted advisor rolled into one. I loved that. I've rolled into one. Tony Robbins could also fit into guru as well, because he's very famous, but he does on his website talk about one-on-one coaching and how you can get coached by Tony Robbins or somebody who has learned like Tony Robbins' method. A lot of the other gurus that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, they don't do one-on-one coaching necessarily, but they have books and different things that you can learn from. So, like I said, I am a life and business coach. I actually created a life coaching curriculum through Dreammaker Society. So, Tara Kirby and I co created the Dream Method. And that's a certification where you can actually get certified to be a life and business coach through the Dream Method. Now, here's something I want you to know about coaches. Before you decide to sign up with a coach, you need to know what's their background, what's their training. And this is why I teamed up with Tara Kirby to help create the Dream Method certification to make people life and business coaches, because I saw so many people out there calling themselves a coach with no actual skills, no training on how to be a coach to other people, how to get the information you need to help somebody get to the next step of their lives. So coaching is really about getting someone from point A to point B, holding them accountable, being supportive, and, figuring out what are the roadblocks that are holding them back. Now, one of the most ridiculous things I have ever heard, truly, I'm going to step up on my soapbox for this, is that therapists deal with the past and coaching deals with the future, which is so ridiculous. If you read that on someone's website or somebody says that to you, do not work with them, run. Because that implies that therapists only talk about the past, and that implies that coaches only talk about the future, which is ludicrous. Like, therapists don't just talk about your childhood. I mean, I feel like I need to get that tattooed somewhere on my body and show people all the time. Like, therapists don't just talk about the past. If the past is relevant, you will talk about the past. But if it's not relevant, your therapist isn't going to make you bring up your childhood just for the sake of it if it doesn't pertain to what you're dealing with. And the same thing with coaching. Coaching isn't just looking at the future. You're also looking at what are the patterns you've done before? Like, what hasn't worked? What has worked in the past? What roadblocks are holding you back? So to act like one is past and one is future is just silly. And it honestly makes me a little angry. I don't know if you can hear that in my voice, but it kind of ticks me off because I feel like it devalues both professions when you say that. So here's the thing with coaching. Let me back it up a little bit. Coaching is like the Wild West. There is no governing board. There is no written out, must be followed code of ethics. There's nobody that if you have a bad experience, there's nowhere to turn because there's nobody monitoring coaching. Literally anybody can say, I'm going to be a life coach today. I'm going to be a business coach. I'm going to be a copywriting coach. I'm going to be a branding coach. I'm going to be a hairstylist coach. Whatever it is, you can decide to be a coach of something just by deciding. And again, that goes back to why it was so important to me to team up with Tara Kirby to create a life coaching curriculum to help people and actually give them some ethics, some tools to where they can actually be coaches that have substance behind them. That they aren't just people that decided to be coaches, that they actually got trained, that they're developed in a method, that they have continuing education through the Dream Method, that they have an ethics discussion. I host an ethics conversation at every retreat, and we have an ethics course within the program that everybody who becomes a certified coach has to take. These are things that are important to me, and I think it's important to you as a consumer to know this going into therapy and coaching. Because again, with coaching, you don't have to have any sort of credentials. And I don't want to say that that you have to have credentials in order to be a coach. That's not what I'm saying. I do think though, if you're looking for a coach, it's good to ask like, what training have you done to make yourself the best coach possible? People are always asking me what's the difference between therapy and coaching. And honestly, it's the depth at which we go into things, right? I'm not going to dive deep into, or a coach, I should use a coach as an example. A coach that was taught in the Dream Method is not going to dive deep into someone's depression if it gets brought up or their anxiety. They're going to see how does that affect what you're dealing with right now? How does your anxiety affect how you're growing your business if it's a business client? But then they're going to say something along the lines of that's something I think you should discuss with your therapist, but let's go back to the goals of why you hired me, which is to grow your business, right? So that's what I think is the biggest difference. A lot of the clients that I work with that do primarily life coaching, they typically also have a therapist. So they're going to their therapist for those deeper discussions, and they're coming to me to get that day-to-day accountability, support, reflection, goal setting, all of that. And so that's what I would say are the biggest differences. Now, some of you might be listening to this and being like, I've never even heard of the word coach. Like, what are you talking about? Are you coaching a sport? Like, what do you mean coach? Because that's a newer term, honestly. I mean, life coach has kind of been around for a while, but I guess I shouldn't say it's a newer term. I think the term life coach has been around forever. I just don't think it's been as accepted ever in the past as much as it is now, because we have coaches for all kinds of things now. You can have a business coach. You can, like I said earlier, copywriting coach, branding coach. There's coaches for everything. And again, that's a really good thing because you can learn skills easily. Because here's the thing. At the end of the day, coaches are taking their knowledge, right? These are people that have been in the trenches. Like, let's take a hairstylist coach, for example. Business coach, hairstylist, business coach. This is someone who's been in the hair industry, who has built a business, built their own salon, or built whatever. And now they're taking everything they know, putting it into a method for you to learn from. So you don't have to do all the trial and error. You just get to follow their system and get their guidance, tweak it for what you want, and avoid a bunch of steps, right? That's what coaching really is. So we're going back to the idea of skills. Coaching teaches you skills, but also gives you the accountability and support to go after that. And again, I do life and business coaching. I actually have something coming up that I'm very excited about. So if you want to hear more about that, make sure you follow me on Instagram at with Emily Stevens or at Laidback Achievers. Something cool is coming up. I have a new offer, but I also love coaching. Coaching is so fun. It is so exciting to help someone figure out what's holding them back and then help them reach a goal. I love business coaching and helping someone figure out how to make their job. And I also love business coaching to help someone figure out how to be more of the CEO in their business instead of being in their business and bogged down every day, how to delegate, how to streamline processes. It's like I said, coaching is it can be a very great thing. Now, some red flags are when you see like coaching that says things like can help with PTSD, trauma, depression. Anytime there's a coaching program where they're talking about helping you with trauma, I'd shy away. And here's the reason why. Just because someone has experienced trauma doesn't mean that they have the tools to help you process your trauma. So just because someone's been through something traumatic and has processed their own trauma does not give them the tools to help you process your specific trauma. Does that make sense? And I always tread lightly on this because sometimes those are bells you can't unring. If you're not equipped to go into someone's trauma with them and to also help regulate the situation if they get deregulated, then that could be a problem, right? That could be dangerous for the client. If you are trying to process something very deep and traumatic, it's dangerous to not be with someone who is qualified to help you process that. It could create other traumas. It could create further wounds. That's like the big red flag or warning of this podcast. If there is one, this is it. That if you are dealing with something deep-seated, go to a therapist. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Go to a therapist. And I know it feels easier to maybe just go to a coach or somebody that you've connected with that you feel like, well, I really like their personality. They get me. I love their social media. But at the end of the day, it's about your safety and you being in a position that you can process that trauma and be supported in a way that's going to let you process that trauma. Okay, so that's therapy and that's coaching. So let's talk a little bit about gurus. And, I think some people would say that gurus isn't the right term for this, but I looked up what guru means, and it means an influential teacher or popular expert. So some gurus that came to my mind were Brené Brown. She's a PhD researcher on shame and vulnerability. She's wrote many amazing books. I highly recommend. Even go to YouTube and type in Brené Brown and just like watch every video she has. It's incredible. Glennon Doyle. She went to hell and back in her personal life and she started a blog. I believe she started a blog. And now, she's basically a self-help guru. And her most recent book is called Untamed. And I highly recommend that one as well. And then last but not least, I have to mention this one because of the rise and fall and all of that. But Rachel Hollis, she started out as a blog and an event planner. I think she had an event planning business, and slowly became a speaker and basically like a self-help guru. All right. Now, the reason I put these three people in more of the guru category is because they don't necessarily do one-on-one coaching. You can't just like hire Brene Brown. I mean, I'm sure there's a price that you could hire Brene Brown, but the average person isn't just going to hire Brene. I mean, it'd be super cool if you could. But these are people that have more of like a brand, books, podcasts, things like that they are talking about and offering up self-help and life management tools through those channels. They're very well known as well. These are well-known people in the self-help space. And, even that self-help, I feel like, has a negative connotation. But I think there's a lot of good being done in self-help too. Everything has its pros and cons. Everything has some good sides and some bad sides. But so those would be more of the gurus that are in this space. Now, you can absolutely read their books, follow their guidance, and gain a lot from it. Like I said, I love Brene Brown. I love Glennon Doyle. There are people that loved Rachel Hollis's books and still do love them, right? And if that's your thing, then go with it. Do it. If that speaks to your soul, then by all means, read those books and be a part of those personalities. Like I said, I absolutely watch these people. If, though, what you're dealing with is becoming an issue in your life, then you probably need to seek some more personalized help, whether that be with a therapist or possibly a coach, depending on what you're dealing with. I don't know if any of you are on TikTok, but TikTok is full of therapists, coaches, people who want to be gurus, all kinds of mental health and life management tools and skills. I mean, it's flooded with that over there in a good way. I myself do a lot of TikTok content. Same with Instagram. Now more than ever, there's TikTok therapists or Instagram therapists, Instagram coaches, where you can learn things from them through their social media. And that's what's helping change the mental health stigma. The fact that therapists are able to get on social media and talk about their practices and market themselves is huge. I mean, that's something that's happened in the last handful of years. That hasn't always been the case. Like, therapists are supposed to be blank slates, where our therapists or our clients aren't supposed to know anything about us. It's supposed to be about the client experience. And so social media has really turned that upside down a little bit, which is even further showing how therapists show their ethics. Because to be marketing on social media and to still be ethical, there's a lot of boundaries and things you have to put in place with your clients to make sure they know that you are protecting them and their confidentiality at all times, right? Because with therapy, it's confidential. Coaching, again, Wild West, it doesn't have to be confidential because there are no rules. There's no governing body to say how this is supposed to go. But either way, it's just awesome to see people, especially Gen Z. I have to give it up to them for talking about mental health, for talking about anxiety, for talking about things being difficult, for taking it seriously. I mean, think about how many times you've maybe said to an older relative something about your mental health that they haven't taken seriously. Or you get one of those, oh, you'll be fine. It'll be all right. It's like, no shit, it's going to be fine. And I'm still struggling. Like, I'm struggling, and yes, you're right. Eventually it will be fine. And so I think that's a great thing going on with newer generations who are willing to talk about these things, who are willing to be open about these things. And that's trickling up to the other generations, which I think is really great. The stigma around mental health help shouldn't be there. Like I said, it should be just like a broken arm. When you're struggling, you go get help. And there's lots of conversation we could have around how mental health is viewed in our medical system and in our society in America in general, as far as policies and whatnot. That's a topic for another day. I'm talking on the ground level. We are trying to change how mental health is viewed. And I think that is working between all of the therapists, coaches, and gurus. Oh my.